Okay, and we're back, and we are going to build on what we've learned with Perl variables with Perl classes. Okay, doesn't mean in this case doesn't mean you did something wrong. It stands for object orientation as an object-oriented programming. Yeah, class can be thought of as a category. Encapsulation hides the gory details. For example, you can have a class called auto or car. And every car generally steers the same way. Whoa, wait a minute, that's not true. You got some that are front wheel drive and rear wheel drive. So some steer and apply power, some just steer. I think when they first started with cars, some of them even used a tiller like you'd use for a rudder. Inheritance. Example of inheritance in real life, you have this notion called vehicle, which is a higher level abstraction. And that vehicle can be thought of, you have these subclasses, you have these classes such as truck and car and bicycle and unicycle. Polymorphism is the idea that you steer a car, you steer a bicycle, and you steer a unicycle, and you do it in quite different ways in each one, but you cannot have this method called steer on each of them. Matter of fact, I would recommend it as long as they're moving. Okay, class is like a template, it's like a blueprint. Instance is one example. You have this class called car. You drove an instance of that to work or to school this morning, maybe, unless you walked. And basically a class is a type of a data structure. It's an object that has methods and it has states. And we call those fields and methods, or data elements and methods. The idea is the same. A car could be red, white, green, purple, chartreuse, or some other color. That would be a state or a field. And you can have it turn, you can have it back up. That would be methods. Okay, object-oriented Perl is based on three supporting concepts. You got the idea of a package, a reference, and the blessing object into a package. A class in Perl is basically a blueprint for a type of object. And what happens is in Perl, normally like in C++, we would think about something inheriting a class. In Perl, it is blessed into it. Basically, blessing an object into a package, that particular object is told you are a car. Here's what you are as a car. Okay, constructors. Works the same way as it does in C# or C++. Construction of Perl class. It does the storage mechanism. It figures out where it's going to put it. Then it obtains a reference to this, and then it blesses, or it basically gives the object its identity. Okay, the name of the constructor is called new. Perl classes can have several number of constructors. Python only has one. We'll get into Python a little later. I think Python was made by somebody who got tired of messing with C# myself, but we'll see. Okay, you have this notion of default instance values for instance variables. And works as same as defaults for other things. You have destructors, and usually you don't have to worry about those, but it's useful to know how they work because every once in a while they don't. Okay, and here's how Perl manages memory. Okay, you have instance variables and you have class variables, and we'll look at an instance of that. No pun intended. You have class variables and you have class methods, and those are things that are the same no matter what. Like for example, for a car, you might have a class variable that says says construction material, and except for Corvettes and a couple of things, that would be metal. All right, class variables can be stored using a closure over a local variable. We'll see an instance of that using the package variable syntax, and I don't think we see an instance of that. Okay, reblessing is when you change the type of object. Operator overload, and you can describe what plus, minus, and multiplication and all that means. Like, for example, for strings, it's common to use plus as concatenating the strings, that is, putting them together. You don't really get a sum when you add those together. You just get a longer string, but you get the idea. And that's the slideshow for Perl classes. Let's take a look at one really quickly. Okay, this is one of your examples. You can follow along with this. We have this thing called robot. Okay, we have strict here. It didn't say use warnings. That's pretty common. Most people say use strict. A lot of people say use strict and use warning. You should automatically put that in Perl. And for this class, you need to put use warnings here. Okay, class methods.pl. Okay, this is a class robot. It's declared by a package. It's got a serial number, it's got a way of calculating the next serial and total number. Now these two things are relevant to the whole class. If you have 15 or 20 robots running around, all of them should have the same value for next serial and total number. Okay, here's how you do a new one. You pass in your arguments. From that you get the class and the owner. It says okay. You are now a robot, and here's your owner, and here's your serial number, and we'll use class as your class. Okay. This is how you get the owner. Basically, when you call the sub owner with it'll basically take the first thing off of the stack that you pass to it, which you only should be taking one thing anyway, and it will say that's now my owner. Okay. And here's an instance method, get serial number. Each of the robots would have their own serial numbers, but you can ask any of the instances how many total robots there are, and that's contained in there. Okay, some test code. You got Zaphod, Trillion, and Betelgeuse. Okay. Okay, you make a new robot here. Okay, you call out the owner. The owner's going to be Zaphod. Apparently, these robots own themselves. I don't understand that myself, but maybe these are after the Clone Wars or something. Okay, and what happens if you run this? You print out the robot owner. It turns out Zaphod is owned by Zaphod, and he's serial number 1. Okay, we do that 2 more times. Okay, so you should have 3 total robots. So if you ask it how many robots, it'll tell you 3. Now if you do this is this is not invoking a method, this is invoking a class variable or a class field or a class attribute or whatever you call it, and it's going to give you an error because it's not a method. This is not calling a method, it's calling a field. This is and you're using the wrong syntax. To call a class method, you have to use the arrows here. Now let's skip back up here to the top here. Okay, we talked earlier about an anonymous subroutines. Here you go. Here's where they are. And that's just to save a little space and all that, because you could also sit there and do what you're doing here, but this is the way they chose to do it for that. Okay, this is talking about classes and class methods and class data in Perl. Hope this helped.